let's get started. How does this work? So yeah, just few words about me. So I've been working in the procurement field, not yet 20 years, but getting close. I was working, and I've been doing pretty much everything in procurement, from a buyer to a chief procurement officer, and pretty much everything in between. And mostly I've been working with indirect procurement, services purchasing, and then procurement development. So a lot with kind of implementation of and development of processes and tools, implementation, change management, and topics like that. I was 8 years at Nokia, implementing kind of the biggest part of that was we were implementing Ariba procure-to-pay solution to marketing category at Nokia. And then marketing was one of the biggest indirect categories with several billions of euros of spend. So that was really interesting times. Then I was working at Konecranes, head of indirect sourcing there. I think Konecranes has a factory in Ukraine, if I don't remember incorrectly. And then there I was, on top of kind of being the head of indirect sourcing, also responsible for different solutions used in procurement. Then I went to Telia, which is the largest mobile operator in the Nordics, working in 7 countries across the Baltic Sea, you could say, where I was having different roles. I was the chief procurement officer for Telia Finland. Then I had a regional role in Europe, which was all the mobile operators other than Sweden. And then I was also responsible for the sourcing strategy and transformation, analytics, and competence development. And then I went to Paulig, which is not that much known outside Finland as Paulig. Paulig is basically a coffee producer in Finland, and Finns drink the most coffee in the world per capita. So it's an important company in Finland. But also there's spices business and tortilla and kind of Tex-Mex business included. So that was interesting to be kind of, it's very concrete that when you work with food and groceries. So that was fun. And there I was also heading indirect sourcing and sourcing development. And now about 2.5 years, I've been working in my own company. I founded it together with an old Nokia colleague. So we have a company called Zeal Sourcing. We are this kind of boutique sourcing consulting company. We are 10 people now, and basically what we do is we help our customers to buy stuff, but do it better. So we do a lot of sourcing strategy, sourcing development, especially the change management related to different development projects, and also then challenging our procurement projects as well. So that's about me. So then we can jump into the topic of today. So a few words about kind of procurement, what's happening in the procurement industry, or how we see it, at least in the, and then of course we are looking at from Finland basically, or mainly looking at Finland, but we also work in Sweden. We've done some projects in Germany and in Norway. So let's say Northern Europe is kind of our sphere of influence, and where we talk to different companies. And a few things which are happening. There's kind of the mode of procurement is changing, and there's several reasons for that. Where digital transformation is actually a really important one, because it's enabling actually to use the human resources into something else than kind of very transactional work, which you can automate. And then you need to be more of a business thinker. You need to be thinking about kind of solving problems rather than just executing kind of operational stuff. And that has an impact that what we call it is kind of procurement should be more design thinking. You should be more understanding the end users rather than kind of being a process police or kind of, you know, controlling that everybody follows the process. And instead of having kind of this long list of requirements that, you know, I have this Excel with 250 lines that the suppliers need to answer, maybe the procurement should be more understanding what the users' pain points are, what do they actually need in their everyday life, and then discuss with suppliers how to solve those problems rather than come up with very kind of functional requirements. And looking from solution point of view, if you're buying a solution, you many times kind of try to think about what solution you want, and then you kind of, you know, go and procure that solution. But maybe you should be testing a lot more, test out five things and see, you know, what works, what doesn't work, and then you get a lot more information about what you are actually procuring, and what is solving the end user's problem. And then kind of the pace, usually procurement process is this very long waterfall process with several toll gates and milestones, with kind of really big decision in the end. You know, are we going to buy this now from this supplier with this price? But maybe again, you should be doing a lot more kind of agile process with testing different solutions, talking with different suppliers, maybe testing out how is it actually to work with these suppliers, and then kind of coming together toward the solution that you're driving for. So that's kind of a big kind of competence thing that we see that procurement should be going through. This is the of course the big thing to everybody who is working in procurement, and I don't need to talk to you about kind of the war, but the whole pandemic started it, I would say, bringing kind of the supply chain and procurement on the really to the kind of CEO table. That you know, if you were kind of importing something from Far East and China went close, then you kind of, you know, it came really close that how big the role of procurement actually is. And there's all kind of supply chain disruptions still ongoing, of course, depending on the industry. But really the big fish in the sea is then all of this environmental change, climate crisis that we are going through, and what that will mean to the whole global economy and every company on the planet. Yeah. So what do we see as kind of key topics for next year? Inflation is running high in most of the countries around the world. There is a big energy crisis at the moment. Depending on the country and the situation, it might take different forms, but it will impact most of the companies going forward. Like I said, the continuing supply chain challenges still are there. Sustainability is basically part of everything procurement is doing in one way or another, and that will be kind of, so far most of the companies have been happy to kind of report, for example, sustainability topics. So trying to kind of collect data on carbon footprint and then report it in a sustainability report. But I would say now we are starting to move towards where it actually, you need to start looking into the decisions. How do we actually, you know, what kind of decisions do we do based on different sustainability topics? So how much more are we willing to pay for more sustainable goods, for example? Diversity and inclusivity, they have already been a big topics in US, and we see that coming to Europe more and more. Taking different people groups into kind of decision making. Supply management has been an important topic, but it's still, I would say now procurement is more and more focusing on kind of taking an ownership of that supplier portfolio and then managing those suppliers, whether it's relationship performance, but also the risk then related to different suppliers. And then digitalization, digital transformation, all the kind of tools, automation of processes and analytics is a one of the key topics. It's been a long time, but the transformation is not so easy, and it will not be so. It will not be over very soon. So let's then talk a little bit about what this digital transformation is. And as an engineer, I kind of like to start with terminology, so we kind of agree what are we talking about. There is a term digitalization used a lot. I've been using it already in this lecture. But if you try to search for what is digitalization, there's not really, at least in the source of all information, Wikipedia, there's no terminology kind of term with digitalization explained there. But there's two terms. There's digitization, which is basically meaning that you convert information into digital format. So if you have papers, scanning them into a PDF is digitizing that information. But then digital transformation is when you use something new technology to solve new problems. So you take a new technology which could be rapidly changing, and then you use that digital technology to solve your business problems. And why do kind of procurement, for example, need to transform? This is a little bit similar topics that from the competence slide that there was about this design thinking, and it's coming from very much the same kind of change in the role of procurement as well. That today procurement is a lot more strategic what it was a few years ago. But there is this industry-wide shift happening in procurement, and kind of the traditional procurement paradigm is that your procurement is focused on cost reduction and securing the supply of goods and services. And of course, that still is there as a role. But I would say that the new paradigm is a lot more about solving business problems and really kind of delivering value and delivering competitive advantage for the organization, rather than just cutting cost and taking the cheapest option. In the traditional way, competitive pressure was the kind of lever. So you had something you wanted to buy, you used competition to get what you wanted at the cost you wanted. But now we're a lot more focusing on collaboration with suppliers, joint development, and really kind of working together with suppliers to find the optimal solution. Internal focus has been on stakeholder compliance. Like I mentioned, the process police role. So traditionally procurement has been the one kind of policing that everybody is following the agreed processes. But now in the new paradigm, the focus is a lot more about being a trusted advisor to the business, like an internal consultant, helping the business to thrive, not to try to control that, for example, processes are followed. Moving from managing transactions to more managing relationships, and rather than kind of analytically going through different market situations and kind of looking it very from analytical point of view, now it's maybe more about kind of understanding the business, understanding the relationships, and using more soft skills to solve those problems. And traditionally procurement has been really wanting to kind of have a mandate to own the spend and control the processes. But now it's more about facilitating and enabling the company to do what it needs to do. So that's kind of few key topics there. How the role of procurement is changing, and this is one way to look at it. That you know, on the y-axis you have commitment to stakeholder success. So are you kind of, you know, do you want your stakeholder to succeed? And then are you really an expert in the topic that you are buying? So good example could be marketing category, for example, and how well do you really understand the market? What do you bring to the table? So if you're only there to say kind of that there's a process that procurement needs to be involved. So if you are there just to be involved and you know, look at the contract before it's signed, maybe you don't bring a lot to the table. But if you really understand and know the supplier market, you can kind of bring new business models together with partners. Maybe you are more on the right hand side then, that you bring value to the table. And this is what I'm talking about, that procurement really should come a trusted advisor to the business rather than being a rival or order taker. And I don't think anybody wants to be a dead weight. And this is a recent survey from Deloitte, kind of top priority for CPOs, and digital transformation is there in top 3, and there's a 20% increase from the study. They do it every 2 years. So this digital transformation really is on CPO's table in most of the companies. So then if we look a little bit about any questions at this stage, by the way, hope I'm not going too fast.
No questions?
All good.
Okay.
All good.
You're not
Good.
too quickly. All good.
Then we move on. So a little bit about kind of what kind of technologies are then relevant for procurement. This is a study a few years back by the conference board, and there's kind of all kind of different trends and different digital technologies, and what of them are kind of relevant for procurement. And this kind of time scale is 5 years, and it's few years old, so many of these things are kind of moved already to close. But there's, I would say, still many companies have really a long way to go to having a true kind of digital end-to-end process. You could have digitalized kind of part of the processes and automate, for example, invoice coding and approvals and such. You can automate, but then really going from end to end, many companies are still struggling with that. Machine learning has come to play a big part. We will talk about data and analytics shortly more, but machine learning plays a key role in kind of, for example, classification of spend and so on. And cloud, of course, is already kind of very much today, not a trend as such. But one thing that we do see is still kind of an interesting topic is that a few years back, most of the companies at least wanted to have this kind of full scale platform that you know, you buy one platform and it covers your needs from source to pay to settlement. So that is started to change, that more and more companies are starting to look more a best of breed architecture, and there's several reasons for that. These big platform projects, they are really big projects, and with big project it means big investment, but it also means larger risk with the change management and really utilization of the platform. And then another view is that many of these big platforms are actually they have been acquiring smaller companies and then put some kind of an integration in place and call it under one brand that now we have a platform. And you know, many of those modules within the platform are not really best of breed. So it means that when you buy a platform for the whole end-to-end, you might get few of the modules, or one of the modules could be really good for purpose, but let's say that 2 or 3 modules are not what you would really like to have in place. And then the integration kind of technology has advanced rapidly, so now it's a lot more easier to integrate different solutions, have data lakes and analytic solutions to manage the end-to-end. So that has given companies freedom also to move away from this idea that we need one system, and maybe, you know, you have 5 systems, but then you've thought out how is the data flowing, how is the process going with these systems, and that's fine, and that could be a lot cheaper, a lot easier to implement, and then a lot more better solution all in all. This is an example of this kind of best of breed ecosystem that you could be using. This is, I think, maybe two years old, and I took on the next slide is the recent one that I just got, which also tells a story that the number of kind of startups in this procurement space has been really growing rapidly, and there's a lot of innovation happening with these different kind of spot type of tools and solutions, and you're really leaving a lot of innovation kind of on the table if you think that you only want to have one solution where you handle procurement. And this is the latest one. Kearney is a global consulting company, and they are managing this kind of map of different possible solutions. And of course, these are just examples. So you could have, so there's a Icertis here for CLM, but of course you have like 10, 20 different CLM systems that you could have in place. But a lot of stuff is happening in the startup space, and that's kind of really interesting. And coming to the topic where I started with, that we need to be a lot more braver to experience and try out different systems rather than kind of trying to think that we will have one solution that will solve all of our problems. Okay, then really important topic, you know, the tools is one thing, but really before going into the tools, you need to have defined how kind of your architecture works, what are the different processes you will have, and how will they actually work. So this is one way to look at kind of business architecture. So there's a conceptual level. What are we actually doing? Going from business, data, system to technology. There's a logical level. How do we do it? And then there's a physical level. With what are we going to do it? And the key thing is that we need to start here from the upper left corner, thinking about strategy. What are we really trying to achieve? What are our goals? Who are our stakeholders? Data architecture, concepts and roles, then use cases, processes, data models, and so on, before we go to these technology selections. And you could be surprised how typical it still is that companies kind of fall in love with a tool, and then they buy a tool, and then they are really surprised when nothing works. Or nothing changes. The tool might work perfectly, but if nobody is using it and it's not integrating to other ways that the company is working, then nothing really changes. Nothing is transformed. So that's kind of the key thing. So yeah, important to start with the strategy processes, and then before jumping into the deep end with what are we going to use. Procurement is or you know, the system is a toolbox. There is not one, or you have different kind of things you need to do in procurement, and where you can utilize digital tools and digital technology. And like I said, you can get all of this from one place, or you can think about having kind of several tools to cover the area. And key thing is that there is no one toolbox that would work with everyone. You need to take your company industry into play, company maturity with processes, with IT, and so on, to figure out what is the kind of optimal toolbox for your procurement. But in general, this is very, if we look at the previous picture with the lots of arrows, that's kind of the toolbox you could be having. But this is kind of a generalization of the key areas where would you need a tool in procurement. And spend analytics is where everything starts. You really need to know kind of that's where everything kind of starts, that you know what are you buying, from whom, and so on. So having visibility on the spend is really important. You could have a tool to manage your pipeline, to kind of understand, and that's a little bit depends how big sourcing organization you have, whether the pipeline management is somewhere where you want to invest. Then e-sourcing. So where do you handle your RFXs? If you do e-auctions, for example, again, some companies might really benefit from having reusable templates and ways of sourcing something you do really often. And for some companies, it might not really pay off to have an e-sourcing solution at place. Contract management. Many companies that I've or most of the companies that I meet, they don't really know where their contracts are. They don't know what kind of contracts they have in place, and so on. So that is a huge area of improvement, and really important area. You should really know what contracts you have, when are they expiring, what kind of clauses there are, and then contract analytics is a really interesting area, that if we can add some metadata on the contracts and do analytics on those. For example, if you could go to your CFO and tell how much fixed commitments do you have in your contract base, I could assume that the CFO would be really interested about that. But many companies have no clue on the fixed commitments they have. So how much have they actually contractually committed to pay for next 3 years, for example. Purchase to pay, then we are kind of in the core of procurement digitalization. So having catalogs and purchase order systems, and then handling invoices, matching approvals, and so on. Supply management systems are more and more coming popular and usual. So like I said, supply management has really is an important topic these days. So there are several systems happening there, and there you could be doing, on top of kind of managing the supply data, you could have supply performance data there. You could do different supply surveys, audits, stuff like that, supported by one single system. And then inventory management, if you have more direct type of materials which are in inventories, then of course inventory management system and in ERP type of functionalities are key there. Then shortly about analytics, I would say data is, and we will come back to that yet, but data is really kind of key. And especially in the best of breed architecture, the most important thing to solve is how is the data actually flowing between different processes, where is the data created, where is it handled, and where is it stored. And procurement doesn't have big data, so this is not super complicated. But you need to kind of think about the data strategy and data architecture to be able to do analytics then. So analytics is really kind of understanding, analyzing different models, different scenarios to first of all understand where we are, and then also predict different future states, their probability, and so on. And maybe even then they could be, you could be monitoring different events with analytics. And when something happens, then you have pre-thought processes of what you will do. If some prices go up or down, or if there's an earthquake somewhere, or you could have different data monitoring processes. But then it's really important to be able to kind of monitor when something happens and what will you do after that. And then AI, artificial intelligence, is something that is thrown around a lot, and that is the kind of technology to emulate human performance. Usually it's learning or coming to your own conclusions, and at least appearing to understand kind of complex content. And machine learning is a good example that, if 10 companies have been doing kind of spend classification, in some spend analytics tool, you can benefit from that by kind of utilizing that information that, okay, most of the companies have classified this supplier into this category. Maybe it's in your spend that category as well. That's a good example of utilizing machine learning in spend analytics. Then about competences in analytics, like I said, it's kind of key thing in digital transformation is how do you lead it with data. And of course you need people then to do the analytics, and what kind of competences. This is a kind of a new type of role also in many procurement organizations. And basically I've taken here 3 different competences of math skills. If you really know your way around different algorithms and so on. You have business understanding, you know what the business wants, and then you have the coding skills. So it could be about kind of creating databases or coding different analytic solutions, and visualizing the data, for example. And then there's the intersections of these competences. So if you have math skills and business understanding, it's kind of the traditional business analytics or analyst. If you have math skills and coding skills, then you're probably in kind of data scientist, machine learning, algorithm development. You could have business understanding and coding skills, but no math skills. So that's really the danger zone. You could be creating a really nice looking predictive models, but if they are not true, then you could be doing a lot of kind of wrong assumptions, for example. And if you have all of these 3, that's really the unicorn for procurement analyst, because then you can you understand what you're doing, you understand what the business needs, and you can actually make stuff happen by yourself. You don't need to always buy services or wait for IT department to do something, or whoever is then doing that coding part. So that's something really, really useful. I once had a guy who could do all of this, and it was pretty fun to work with him, because you could give him a problem in the morning, and in the afternoon it was kind of solved and implemented in the tool. So that's that's a rare position to be, but it's possible. And then, like I said, spend analytics is kind of that's kind of the basic stuff, and where procurement analytics start. And what is then kind of included in spend data is what is bought, who is buying, from whom, who is the supplier, at what price, when was it bought, and possibly where was it bought. That could be really interesting. If you have kind of geographical data, for example, that example of an earthquake, then you can maybe know what of your spend is influenced by an earthquake or volcano, or what that might be. So those are kind of key elements of spend analytics. And then, of course, analyzing, kind of bringing the data together is one thing, but then those decisions or opportunities you can find out, that's where the value is. So it's really important also to be able to go from data to actionable actions that you can kind of work and bring value to the company. So, for example, we can know which suppliers are we use, but then the decisions or thought processes, are we benefiting from the scale we have with suppliers? Are we using those suppliers that we actually wanted to use, that we've thought are preferred? Is there opportunity to consolidate suppliers? And what is purchased actually outside of an approved supplier list? So those are the kind of follow-up questions that you can then ask when you have the data in one place. And then when you have spend analytics in place, then you can start to explore other areas that are of interest. So you could be expanding your supply business intelligence with external data sources. You could be combining it with financials, kind of reports of the suppliers to get monitoring on the supplier financial status, for example. You could be doing different benchmarks, having supply scorecards again. Maybe there's automated fraud detection that you could have some kind of a monitoring if somebody is sending hundreds of invoices that go below some threshold, which could be then an example of a fraud happening at some point. And then different savings opportunities could be one thing with combining data with spend data with different category data, for example. Then I have a short example of what we did at Telia. Just few slides of our transformation strategy to give an idea what it could like in one company. So we created a new sourcing strategy for the sourcing organization, and then our mission was really that sourcing or procurement existed to manage our supplier relationship. So that was kind of the role, to be that intermediary part between the company and all the suppliers. And the targets were to maximize value from customer satisfaction, having right service levels, right quality, access to innovation, and responsible supply sustainability, and then minimize waste. So have the right total cost, simplify where we could, whether it was products or processes, and then optimize cash flow. And that was kind of the heart of the strategy, why sourcing organization existed at Telia. There were different fundamentals. There was a big change in the group and in the sourcing. So we wanted to create this new culture of doing things. One of the fundamental was differentiated way of working. So for example, in supply management, all suppliers are not equal. So you have more important suppliers where you might have 5 really truly strategic suppliers, and then in the end you could have on the bottom level like thousands of suppliers that you cannot manage them in the same way that the truly strategic ones. Pipeline management to really understand the work going around, what you can combine between different countries, for example, and then go online, go digital, be fact-based. So the data, digital transformation and analytics. We had different priorities. These were all kind of change programs. And then we had a rolling development plan, which was basically our program management office following the different development projects ongoing. And one of the things with the digital tools was to really put the end user. So procurement is funny in a way that if you think about buying, it actually affects most of the people in the company, I would say. You know, at some point, almost all the employees need to buy something. So if you want to implement the tool for that buying, you really need to understand the end user, their needs and their wants. And then kind of thinking that we start from somewhere and first build an airplane, then learn to fly, and then maybe someday we can kind of, you know, have that automated processes and truly integrated IT landscape and so on. So first learn to walk before you start running was the message. And then stakeholder collaboration was a key thing. So many times procurement is involved way too late in the process. So kind of aiming to get procurement involved earlier was a key thing in the strategy. And that meant being truly the business partner, discussing with the stakeholders about the procurement problems they had and how procurement could help in solving those problems. And then offloading and automation. So automation was one thing. We built a shared service center in Lithuania to really then kind of leave time and resources for the sourcing managers to be discussion with the stakeholders and be that business partner. Like I said, you know, if you are operationally doing some transactional work, it's really hard to be a strategic business partner at the same time. There's lots of animation here, but those are the key things to free up people's space to do these more strategic things with suppliers and then with different categories. So, short summary, role of procurement is transforming and it needs to transform. And you should be aiming to automate all the operational and tactical tasks and focus the resources on strategic work and value delivery, whether it's with internal business partners or business stakeholders or suppliers. And you really need the right people and competences to succeed. And it's not about technology, it's really about people and processes and managing the change. And then data is really everything with your digital transformation. So without proper data management and strategy, it's really hard to succeed. Good. That's it. Any questions?